everybody, I'm back with another video, and today's video is going to be about an offensive organization structure, the key features of the offensive structure, and maybe some variations between styles and moving through the thirds of the field and how each of these features change. So without moving forward, let's just define the structures, the aspects of the structure that we'll be talking about today. And before we start, just please again like and subscribe to the channel. It's been a huge help. I know the last video you guys were great about that. It really helps me produce more content at a faster rate when subscriptions come in or likes come in, comments, everything helps an awfully lot. So I really appreciate everybody for that. So today like I said, we're going to be talking about an offensive structure. And I'll just put that in the middle, and this will just be the title of the video. And so now the first area we're going to look at is depth. And I know depth can often be talked about in a more advanced area, like in behind the defense. I'm going to use it as like our first line, because typically when you think of a player who's deeper, you think of someone like a deep lying playmaker. He's in the first or second line of your offensive structure, and then that will leave the higher up of the field we go, we'll call that our height. So, and then the last little piece we'll call our width. And then on the spine of the structure, we'll call that our interior players or our connections, and how the whole structure fits together. And so we shouldn't think of these as separate parts, although it is really useful to isolate these to learn about them, but they all should be working in a coherent way to then fulfill the team's goal, and how to progress, how to create goal scoring chances, and then how to prepare for transitions and how it flows into your defensive organization. So those are just a few things to think about. And so now I'm just going to highlight the depth here. Depth now for building from the back is with 3 players including the goalkeeper. And then our width, we're using a single width here, or double width if you define it by the wide area. So 2 players occupying the wide area, which calls it which is why we say single width or double width, because 2 players are occupying the wide corridor. And now the height of the team is set by the striker or the front 3. And then from here, we can see the exterior of the offensive structure. And in the first phase of build-up, it's really important because compactness for the defense isn't as accessible, and it's pretty much not as important. Obviously, connections between players and between lines is still important, but compactness in a high block is very hard, or almost virtually impossible to maintain because of the offsides line set at midfield. So often teams will exploit this space by using the full width of the field and trying to stretch the opposing structure in multiple ways. So they'll stretch them by the width, using the full width of the field, forcing the team to have ways to defend the full width of the field at one time. They'll use the depth given to them using their goalkeeper in the build-up, and then the height, they'll have their players in their front 3 or front 2 or whatever structure it is. They stretch the back line and force them to play in a deeper way. So then this will all change though when we go into the midfield third and attack a team's mid-block. And I'll just make some space here. So I'm just going to move the pieces, and we'll see how it changes. And the mid block, I like to think of it as there's the most variability within teams. And then also a concept or idea that is really popular right now is the idea of minimum width, meaning your offensive structure doesn't play expansively, use the full width of the field at all times, especially teams that, especially when you're playing teams that thrive in an offensive transition, it's crucial to limit the space and force them to get set into their offensive organization and not give them space to exploit in transition when they win the ball. So minimum width can just simply be described how your players or how your team, how much space your team needs in terms of width to accurately carry out the concepts that the coaching staff looks to exploit when trying to progress the ball. But if we're looking at the regular width, it's just how much of the length or how much of the width of the field your team uses in their offensive organization. So now we're in the mid block, and already we see the team changes. It's much more vertically compact. So with this being said, there'll be less space between the lines. So that's where the variability comes in. So there'll be more offensive active concepts using the ball to try and draw out the defense and manipulate their defensive structure vertically on a smaller scale. And what I mean by this, so the whole team won't be stretched out, but now we'll look to manipulate just one or two players to draw them out. So one quick example of this can be an advancing center back. When he dribbles and penetrates into the midfield, the other center back can slide and the fullback can slide to balance out the team. Winger can get wide to counter the fullback's movement. But now, as we get back to the ball, the center back progresses the ball by dribbling, and now it really forces a midfielder from the other team to jump. And then as we see when that happens, the team's vertical compactness on a smaller scale gets undone, which allows for space to be created to then be exploited in some manner. That can be through a third man movement or a blindside movement, a double movement, any kind of these concept movements, superiorities, to then exploit the space. And then also an interesting idea about the structure in the mid block, against the mid block, I should say, when you're attacking, is the positioning from the front three. And oftentimes they start in an offsides position in the blind side, because now the defenders, they struggle to see both the ball and the player, so it allows them to make moves into dangerous areas, going a little bit more undetected rather than just staying in front of the players. So, and then often we find like a false nine movement. We always have like counter imbalances, counter movements and balancing movements. So when a player drops, we need to have a height that's cohesive with the rest of our shape. So as we see here, the 9 drops into a midfield, attacking midfield position, and now the space gets exaggerated here between the two wingers holding the height. So now it wouldn't be uncommon for them to come in here. So now the structure, the height, is much more compact, and the players are working in a more cohesive way in terms of the overall structure. And so now we can move into the attacking a low block, which I talked about a little bit in the last video, but we can see how it directly impacts the structure of a team. I'm just going to move the pieces. And this is a bit different from the other blocks because they all are unique and they all have their own qualities. But this one, vertical compactness is the highest, and the space between the lines is obviously less than the others. And teams typically have more players in their midfield or defensive line, so this gives them better access to the width. So we're attacking a relatively small amount of space and trying to manipulate the players on an even smaller scale now for them to give up more valuable space to then be exploited into goal scoring chances and opportunities. So now this I would say this in the mid block is when minimum width becomes a huge advantage, because, or at least single width held by wide wingers, but especially in the first and second line of your build-up, minimum width becomes crucial, especially in a counter-pressing team. You need a really good rest defense and a very tight and compact rest defense. One, to circulate the ball and have it be able to change direction to exploit new spaces created, but also to put them in a position to cover a loss of possession. So now we can look at our depth. So our depth is held relatively stable because of the offsides rule at half field. So that's something that's uncontrollable really by our players. And now the width can be used as the full width of the field, because in against a low block, again, they will have more players in their first or second line in their defensive. So in their defensive or midfield line, they'll have more players. So it may be more important for the team to use a full width of the field to stretch them horizontally. And by setting the line at the half field, this could be a attempt to stretch them vertically as well. So it's not always a bad thing that the offsides line or half field line is there, because it does stretch the defense a little bit. And then now the height. And then again, the height is pretty interesting in the low block, because a lot of times the height is made by the 9 or attacking midfielders on the weak side. But really the 9 movement I've seen in recent times, the 9 will start in an offside position. So if the ball goes into a wide area, then the defenders will drop. So they'll shift over. And then now when they drop, the 9 is here. So when they drop, it cuts off the center back dropping. So he's allowed to create himself here space in behind the first center back. And so that's just a little piece, but I just want to go through the thirds of the field, as I didn't have that much time tonight. But I just want to go through the thirds of the field, identify the structure and see how they may change. But also there's really like an unlimited amount of small minute changes that you can do to a structure of a team, and so many variations you can do tactically. Just wanted to put out some content tonight to provide some value to everybody. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the video, and I'll see you in the next one.